Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Legal Cheat podcast. You're joining us for the fourth episode of season six. We'll be discussing all about how AI is impacting the legal profession, the risks and opportunities of using it, and what it means for trainees and aspiring solicitors. And I'm, of course, joined by my wonderful colleague and fellow writer, editor, and podcast host, Julia. How are you today, Julia?
Yeah, I'm good. Hello. It's lovely to be back. It's lovely to be talking about something which is on everyone's minds every time they're in an interview for a training contract or a VAC scheme. You're always going to be asked about AI, aren't you? What does it actually mean for lawyers and for trainees? And we thought we'd take you through that today, a little bit about what it's doing to the industry, what it's going to do to the role of the trainee, and the really key question, is it going to take your job?
I mean, there's headlines about it all the time. If you pick up the EFT, you'll pretty much see something about a graduate job apocalypse. I like this term they've coined. It's very uniquely FT. Um, but it just basically means that there's a lot of news going around about fewer entry level roles across the professional services. And I don't think law is necessarily insulated from that, but we see this mostly within the big four that quite a lot of roles are being cut for graduates. And one of the big kind of reasons for that they stipulate is that it's AI replacing entry level roles and quite a lot of the drudge work. I mean, if you look at law, for example, trainees do a lot of document review, quite a lot of rote and manual work. It's quite easy for this to be replaced by AI, really. It's not very, I guess, intelligence intensive, it's labor intensive, just very lots of rote, repetitive work AI is very good at. There's other reasons for why entry level roles are being cut, though, and it's worth highlighting those. Economic uncertainty is making employers a bit more risk averse, and at the moment, it's very expensive to train and recruit a grad. I mean, if you look at the Legal Sheet Firms Most list, which we love to plug, you'll see how much graduates are getting paid and how much NQs are getting paid. So hiring hundreds of graduates is not very economically friendly in this climate, I guess. There's also a surfeit of graduates and talent. If you look around, you probably know lots of graduates who graduated at the same time as you who are extremely talented, extremely clever. So it's just hard to compete for those roles, and there's just few roles going around to get. Um, but yeah, as Julia says, we'll be looking at how AI is impacting the legal profession, the risks and opportunities of using it, and what it means for trainees and aspiring solicitors. So I thought we'd start off with just some use cases of how it's actually being used in law firms. Julia, do you want to talk about administrative work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the bulk of the work that junior lawyers get up to when they first start out can be, as Ryan's mentioned, described as drudge work, grunt work. You're writing up meeting notes maybe from board meetings. You are sending lots of emails with summaries from whatever sort of findings you may have come across as part of like some work that you're doing on a deal or on a case. And this basic admin work in the most mundane way possible is just being streamlined by very, very basic AI tools like Microsoft Copilot. I mean, drafting a succinct email which tells a client exactly what they want to hear or tells a partner exactly what they want to hear in as few words as possible is much easier if you're able to put it through Copilot and it can edit it down for you because, I can imagine a junior lawyer a few years ago would spend quite a bit of time writing the perfect email, which is highlighted exactly where it should be and it's nicely formatted so that it gets everything across. And of course, lots of people still do that manually, but just the fact that that's an option, I think is very important. Obviously, there's issues of confidentiality, etc. Um, but yeah, that very basic task that isn't very legal. It's just how lots of companies do work. I mean, at Legal Cheek, sometimes people put their emails through ChatGPT as well. It just happens at lots of companies now. But yeah, there are some very legal specific activities that are also being streamlined by AI, and there are some tools that are very legal specific that are being used to do this. Ryan, what's the next one that you wanted to talk about?
I'd say contract drafting. So I used to be a paralegal before I started here at Legal Cheek and before I secured my training contract. And most of my work was drafting contract or court documents mainly because I worked in litigation. And whilst I was there, it was only a smaller firm, so I don't think we had the same investment or types of like legal AI tools there. We used to rely a lot on manual drafting or precedent bank. So what precedent bank is, if you don't know, it's just a bank of templates of previous court documents that people have written. And what you can do is you kind of just go through that template, try and find one as close to the case you're working on as possible, and then just tweak it ever so slightly so it makes sense in whatever kind of claim you're doing. That's how it used to work anyway. But nowadays, you can just use AI to automatically draft standard agreements in seconds. If it would take me, what, a couple of, maybe like 3 hours to draft some instructions to counsel, that's some court documents, quite a lengthy one, like it's instructions to your barrister. That takes a very long time, but I could also ask AI to do it. And that could probably take it, what, a minute, 2 minutes max. It saves so much time. But I do think there's still room for kind of human lawyers are still essential here. You've obviously got to check whatever contract or court document you are, well, it has drafted for you. It aligns with your client's commercial intent, what they want from it. It can be very good at drafting legal documents, but whether or not that's actually what your client wants and you fully understood their intention is down to the human lawyer. Also, I think it will struggle if you're drafting novel or bespoke clauses. If it's something it hasn't come across before and it doesn't have much experience with, I don't imagine that the AI can actually critically think very well. I mean, we all do critical thinking tests for like assessment centers for law firm applications. If you tried asking ChatGPT to do a Watson Glaser for you, which I think I might have tried to do once, it's not very good at critical thinking. So I think when you've got that novel element to it or some particular like, difficulty or nuance to a contract or a court document, you need the human lawyer there to be able to actually draft it or review the output and make sure it is sound. I just want to bounce off the back of the admin work there too with something a bit more legal specific. Time recording, it's something you have to do as a trainee. You have billable hours set each year. I mean, at some of the crazy big law firms in London, you might be looking at near to 2,000 hours a year you've got to bill to a client. And when you time record, you basically bill your time in 6 minute intervals. They're called units. And it's a really tedious task. Say I talked about writing that court document that took me 3 hours. After I've written that court document, I got to go into a system and log that I've just worked 3 hours writing a court document. There's some AI tools coming along now that actually record your time in the background for you doing a specific task. It just means a lot less manual login and it's a lot less of that drudge work that can actually just take up so much of your own time anyway. And it means you're just billing more hours to the client than you would do otherwise. You'd have to worry about that. But just moving on to the next one. Do you want to talk about legal research, Julia?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also a very key trainee task is just reviewing a large sort of bulk of material in order to bring back some findings. I mean, the one I'm thinking about is if you're working in an antitrust seat, you're going to need to do some multi-jurisdictional analysis. But there are lots and lots of tools now that are available that are able to summarize information from multiple sources and also provide citations. I think the one that gets talked about quite a bit is LexisNexis is that's a fun thing to pronounce. Gen AI, a legal research platform, which is bespoke for that purpose. And it's apparently, well, this is according to some report when it was first released, it actually has been materially saving time up to 5 hours per user a week when it's used specifically for legal research. And obviously, you need to fact check it. You need to make sure that you have that human oversight. And I'm sure we'll talk about accuracy and hallucinations later on. But it's just streamlining that process in a way that really wasn't available previously. I think you also wanted to talk a little. Oh, I can't remember if this is the sort of last one you
I've got
wanted to talk
two.
about.
I've got
You've
two
got
here.
two
We've
more.
got
Yeah, yeah,
document
yeah.
review.
Document
So
review.
yeah, back in the day, document review, think about so disclosure is this exercise you do during litigation where each of the parties have to give each other documents relevant to the case, and they've got to be able to look through them. If it's a big case, there might be millions of documents there. Same with due diligence. Say you're working on a big like merger and acquisition, there's going to be millions of documents there relating to that. Think back in the day, like maybe we're talking the 80s before like technology in a law firm was really that prevalent. You can imagine like trainees huddled in a dark and gloomy room late into the night, like sleep deprived, manually going through all these documents, looking for something, trying to flag any kind of errors or discrepancies or problems that might occur, or anything relevant to the case or the acquisition at hand. Whereas nowadays, you have AI tools that can do reviews of millions of documents that might be in these document disclosure exercise or due diligence exercises, the AI tools can filter through the documents and look for things like keywords or maybe identify jurisdictions that those documents are relevant to. So say you're looking at, I don't know, a merger and acquisition of just the company's branch in Italy, for example, you might be able to filter them through and just look for documents relating to Italy rather than all over the world. You can also filter for document types. So maybe you're looking for a change of control clause, something like that. It it's just a lot more helpful than obviously manually going through millions of documents, which might otherwise take weeks and weeks and weeks. And it still obviously takes a while for the trainees to actually review those documents that are flagged and that they do find, but it just saves the actual effort of going around and searching for it on this treasure hunt. And then lastly, I just want to touch upon something which is very futuristic to me and I've never came across before, but I have heard about. And it's litigation prediction and analytical tools. And it's like a type of legal AI that uses data and machine learning, not that I know anything about that, to forecast how a legal dispute might play out. So it will look at the likelihood of success of a case, the previous decisions of a court and also of specific judges to see what like the success rate is like, I believe, and also likely settlement ranges if it's like a litigation case. And what will happen is I think litigation lawyers will kind of use that to guide litigation strategy. I don't think it's too prevalent at the moment. I think it's something that is in the works, but it's something to keep your eye out on. I mean, just I would say 5 years ago or so, when I was at the beginning of uni, I can't remember ChatGPT being around. It only came around when I was starting to finish uni and people starting to use it. So these things kind of grow exponentially out of nowhere. So it's something to keep your eye out on over the next couple of years, I would say. But Julia, do you want to talk about how some firms are actually different types of legal tech they're using? And because there's quite a range of them out there now that I keep hearing about in the news, and different firms use different types.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first key thing to emphasize here is that law firms historically were not known for their progressive adoption of different technologies. They're known for being quite traditional organizations. Um, but with AI, it seems that they've really wanted to be at the front of that wave. They've lots and lots of different law firms have expressed not only interest but active, active innovative appetite for AI. Um, I think the first firm that started using Harvey, we'll talk a little bit about different tools that are available, but Harvey AI is one of the biggest legal AI sort of tools out there. And I think Allen and Overy back then, A&O Sherman now, were the first firm to sort of take them on board in 2023,
Sounds about right. It's 2022. Oh, somewhere around there.
something like that. It was a few years ago, but they were their first client. Um, and I think lots of different firms are now using AI routinely, whether it's having their own in-house tools. Like I think Shoesmiths has their own one called, I don't know if they pronounce it CIA or SIA, but it's spelt like that. It's a contract reviewing system. Baker and McKenzie have, I think, won a few awards because of their sort of tech approach. They have like a cyber incident response tool. It's weird, but it helps identify and analyze specific obligations related to data breaches and then
Mm,
summarizes sort of notification requirements. So that's very specialist and
yeah.
it's made in collaboration with like one of their teams, like their cybersecurity practice. That's it. So you can see that there are some law firms that have very specialist practice area specific tools that they've developed. Some firms take on tools that have been developed outside of their own sort of remits. Some have developed their own that are slightly more generalist. And there are lots and lots of cases where these have been used quite effectively. Wilkie used AI in a big sort of litigation case in the way that Ryan's been mentioning, because they needed to review hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of documents for, I can't remember what it was. My goodness. But yeah, it saved them lots and lots of time. Ashurst is another firm that has very sort of a very strong AI ethos. According to the FT, sort of most recently, at least 60% of their workforce are using AI regularly in their work. Um,
And they have
and
that advanced division too, which is kind of
yeah,
like the legal consultancy technology hybrid that comes up with technology solutions using AI.
Yeah, exactly. And there are a
Mm,
few firms like that that don't just advise on AI related cases or deals,
mm,
but actually have their own, yeah, consulting branch. Bird and Bird have one, Ashurst have one. I think Slaughter may have sort of like an innovation arm. I can't remember if they provide
mm.
consultancy themselves.
CMS too. I think
Yeah,
their tagline is
yes, they do. They have their own tool.
Vortex Future.
They
But,
developed Nox Tour, which is like that was developed in collaboration with
mm,
CMS, which is another tool. So yeah, it's not only is it an area where law firms are sort of advising clients on regulatory issues, etc., but it's also become almost an avenue for, well, additional revenue in some ways because they're, you know, well, it's a form of business in a way. I'm trying to think, what was the other ones?
there was a trainee at A&O Shaman I read about a while back. Yeah, I think he's quite famous now, but for the life of me, I cannot remember the name. I think they left in 2020. They trained there, and then they went off to go start their own legal tech startup, which I can't remember which one it is, but it's a big one. And then they ended up selling it to Thomson Reuters, who obviously Reuters, the
Yeah.
newspaper, and who are behind Practical Law and Westlaw and all that shebang. So I
Yeah.
mean, it's a very profitable business. I think as well as that, there's a few other law firms which have got Simmons and Simmons have got Percy, which
Percy?
is something that
Yeah.
yeah, they developed it in-house. I remember that 'cause Percy Pig from M&S, but they developed they developed all that in-house. That's very bespoke to them. Clifford Chance and loads of other firms use Microsoft Copilot and I think some other in-house AI tools. And
Yeah.
then Ropes and Gray, I'm not sure what they use, but I read a story about them where I don't think they mandate that their trainees spend time, but I think they allow their trainees to spend up to 20%, 25% of their time on AI experimentation.
Oh,
So I think
cool.
they've got, yeah, it's like a target hours of 1900 per year, but they'll all spend 25% of that on
Yeah.
experimenting with AI. So
My God.
clearly they're quite invested in it, yeah.
Yeah. And then this is more of a fun one. But actually earlier this year, well, not earlier this year, I think last year, um, we had in the UK the launch of the first pure sort of AI law firm. And it received approval from the Solicitors Regulation Authority, which is it's called Garfield AI. Which, I mean, I haven't heard anything about it beyond the fact that it's started now, but the fact that it exists is pretty insane, at all. I mean, it's it's not exactly like the most sophisticated model. I think it's about, oh, what is it?
I think
Four.
it's debt recovery
Debt, yeah.
only.
So like, you can pay like £2 to get a debt chasing letter or debt
Mm,
chase letter or whatever it's called. Um,
mm.
but yeah, so it is at the forefront of lots of innovative models, lots of AI is, and not just helping lawyers do their work, but bringing in work for lawyers themselves. Yeah. And let's talk a little bit about, I guess, the big tools that are used. Harvey is the most famous one, I think.
We've
Obviously,
got
hmm?
Legora and Luminance too. They all do slightly. The scope of them are all slightly different.
Yeah,
I think Harvey's very big on drafting and research. Luminance is a lot about AI document reviews. I think in a sense they actually can be complementary,
yeah,
but I don't imagine the licensing fees for firms that use them are cheap. So I
yeah.
think you want to get one that does all like a one-stop shop, a full service AI legal tech within the law firm, I guess.
Yeah, and they have loads of customers now. In 2024, Harvey gained 100 new customers, so clearly there's
Oh
an
wow.
appetite for it. And more than doubled its headcount as a company in its own right. So it's a really big area of growth. Um, I
That
think,
appetite is reflected as well in the funding rounds they keep having. You always see them in the news that Harvey's been, I think this just been valued at $8 billion and Lagora's at 1.8 billion. Like they are very, very, very profitable companies.
yeah, God, $8 billion. That was the most recent
It'd be
fund.
nice.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think so.
Christ. So it's clearly, well, it's clearly an area that people are interested in. But yeah, so we've talked a little bit about the sort of tasks that trainees or sort of lawyers might use AI for. how law firms are implementing it and which law firms are sort of, well, a few examples of law firms, but how do you see this actually materially changing the way that trainees, work within law firms? Do you buy into this sort of fear mongering that it's going to completely decimate the legal grad market, or do you have a slightly more skeptical view?
I take a more nuanced view, I think. I don't think in any way AI is just going to fully replace all the entry level jobs out there. Obviously, we've discussed that quite a lot of the jobs it can do, it makes the jobs that a trainee would do otherwise very much more efficient, much more streamlined. Um, However, I don't think that means there's no room for trainees at that point. It just means that the role of a trainee is kind of switching. So they're moving from being kind of the drafters of contracts or the reviewers of contracts to now being the supervisor of AI output. It's they're now taking on a more supervisory role than they were before. It's like a trainee would draft a contract and then pass it to their supervisors to have a review. But now a trainee's passing through the initial information into a kind of contract matrix or some other AI drafter, and then they're reviewing the output of that, making sure it makes sense with the client's intentions and their commercial considerations, that everything's legally and factually correct. There's no hallucinations there. So I still think there is a lot of room for trainees, and like I don't think that all entry level jobs are going anywhere. And even if you look at the legal cheap merciless ones, again, shameless plug, you can see that the trainee numbers haven't gone down like by any significant number at all. Not that I've noticed anyway. I can't see any firms that have just massively like dipped, offering like 20 fewer training contracts than the year before. So I don't think it's impacting. I don't think the fear mongering is 100% correct or accurate. What
Yeah.
do you think?
No, I completely agree. I just think what it does potentially do is open up the opportunity for trainees to take on more, well, analytically complex
Mm,
work. Because if you're getting this out of the way, and really what people should realize is that this has already happened in a sense with, the move from huge reams of paper in back rooms, and someone needed to go through that back in the 80s, and it was the trainee or well,
yeah,
they were called articles. I can't remember the trainee equivalents, the junior
I'll nod.
lawyers. Yeah, nod. And well, we no longer do that because you're able to have all of that on your computer, and even without AI, a search function existed, and that must have felt pretty revolutionary, just to be able to search on like a PDF. So what I think it will do is just open up some space for juniors to perhaps even have more client-facing time,
Mm,
focus on strategy and to focus on these commercial realities, which are becoming much more a part of the lawyer's everyday role, more than it was the case maybe 20 years ago. You are a business advisor, as well as a lawyer today, as a commercial solicitor, and it's no longer sufficient to be just good at quoting statutes and whatnot, because that's not really what you're there for. Anyone with a worth, their salt can look up some basic legal information online. Where you provide value as a commercial solicitor is, how you can apply this to the realities in which your clients operate in. And if trainees are no longer simply trawling through documents, they might be able to practice some of that. And that's a skill that I don't think AI will be replacing anytime soon. This long-term strategizing, creative thinking, critical thinking, that what the Watson Glaser allegedly tests for.
I agree 100%. I think we'll touch on it later when we talk about opportunities that AI brings, but it's hard to replace that very human element of the job that is client relationship management and business development. It's not something trainees typically get involved in. I don't think at the biggest firms you necessarily see partners doing the most legal work. I think that's probably associates and senior associates who do that. But I imagine as you get to the partner level, especially like equity partners, much of their work revolves around bringing in new work from new
Yeah.
clients, winning other clients, and going to conferences and stuff like that to bring in new people to the firm. Um, and I feel like with AI taking a more front and center role, there might be more scope for trainees to get involved in client development earlier on in their career, which is just is also a huge part of the job. As you say, like everyone can access not great, but legal advice and like they can look it up themselves online. It's obviously not going to be as good as going to a law firm and doing it or asking. ChatGPT is obviously not going to be that good without having been legally trained.
Yeah.
Um, but just with this freeing up of time, trainees probably going to have to fill up their time another way, and that's probably just one way they can do it. And I like your point as well about business advisors finding new revenue streams for law firms. But yeah, I think with that, we can touch upon the risks and downsides of using AI. Do you want to talk about hallucinations?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've when I was researching or just sort of reading around for this podcast, obviously hallucinations they are they're massively prevalent because I think people just aren't very used to using AI tools. But essentially, it's become sort of a joke throughout the legal industry that loads and loads of fake case law has been uh, being used as part of arguments in court. And it seems to be the biggest fear of lawyers that these hallucinations and this inaccuracy is going to really affect the way that court cases are carried out. There's a really, sorry, that wasn't particularly well explained, but there's a really hilarious list which has been compiled by a legal researcher who's based in Paris. It's called Damien Charlotin. I don't speak French, apologies. But we can put it in the show notes. And it's just a massive compilation worldwide of all of the times that case law has been cited incorrectly or, AI hallucinated case law has been cited. You open up this list, there's literally one from 6 days ago, fabricated case law, reply brief contained multiple citations the court could not locate and was characterized as fictitious, etc. And that was in California. We've got one in Australia, and it's immensely funny, and it's become sort of headline fodder that so and so barrister, so and so lawyer cited fake law to make their legal argument. There was one I think it was Allende and the London Borough of Haringey, where 5 fake cases were cited. And the funniest part about it was that they didn't even necessarily need to be cited because according to the judge, the arguments were fairly simple and it was just a completely unnecessary inclusion. So this sort of yeah, confidentiality is also a risk, but it's accuracy that's seen as the greatest risk. And the way that law firms are trying to mitigate this, sort of solicitors, I suppose, is that you need that human oversight before you send it off to your barrister. This is litigation, but I think this applies to everything, really. You need someone to go through and check afterwards. And, they're all of these are sort of it's a bit of a warning, you can't just use a tool. You can't just get into a sports car and expect to be able to drive it. I mean, it may be an immensely useful tool to someone who understands and knows how to use it, but if you just get into it, you're going to go crash into a corner. And I think that's what this is really. It's a useful tool, but just learn how to use it before you start, blurting out fake cases in court. I
I
mean,
don't envy Mr. Charlatan. I just looked on the link you're referring to the AI hallucination cases, and there are, you said 811 cases, but it just goes on, and they're all recent, and that must have taken a while to put together. And it just kind of shows the prevalence of using fake citations and just not double checking your work, which many people are getting stricken off for.
yeah, yeah.
Big
And we
time. We
reported on
report on it
that.
a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's giving
but
legal cheek lots to write about. But yeah,
it is, you're getting struck off. I'm kidding. But other than hallucinations, and we talked about confidentiality a little bit there and data protection, that um, tools like ChatGPT aren't secure. Any information you put in there it's not secure. I don't know how it works. I'm not a computer scientist. Does it go to the network, the cloud, whatever these terms mean? But this is why quite a lot of firms license kind of specific AI tools like Harvey because they have protections around it. Same with developing your own in-house. Like if it's an in-house tool that only you use, obviously there's going to be some what's the word I'm looking for? Fences, gates around it. Some
yeah. Ring fencing?
I guess so. Yeah, there are the way you use it is circumscribed. You can't confidential client information can't get leaked in any
Yeah.
sort of way because it's all internal. I think besides that, there's also training gaps. So I think if juniors are relying a lot on AI products, then there's a risk of them not really learning the fundamental skills you need to be a lawyer, like being able to draft effectively or being able to, I don't know, review documents effectively. I think part of something that would have definitely been helpful to being a lawyer a long time ago, when I mentioned kind of document review exercise earlier and due diligence, sat in that dark room going through all these thousands of documents trying to find one that's relevant, just that tactile element of turning over the pages and seeing a new contract you've never seen before, a new type of clause you've never seen before. I imagine you'll just start absorbing information. Whereas if you're using an AI tool that allows you to filter for exactly what you need and skip everything else, there's kind of a lot less of that absorption of new
Yeah.
information, I guess. And beyond law, there's also the risk that AI just becomes a crutch. I mean, AI, ChatGPT didn't become a big thing until maybe my last year of uni. And then I saw a lot of people in the years below me, and just through speaking to them, they were drafting their essays on ChatGPT, and it just lacked that distinctly like human element, and people just forgetting how to now write.
Yeah.
Um, so I do think there are some big risks with using it. But Julie, do you want to talk about the impact on the billable hour and how that's changing?
Yeah, absolutely. And on that point, also didn't have ChatGPT as a thing until my final year. And for reference, I did well, essentially a languages degree, and a lot of our work was like literature and analyzing books. You can't really use AI for that. And every time I saw someone creating something with ChatGPT, I was like, oh my goodness,
This is awful.
it's just horrific. But yes, I think the other sort of prong of the AI's effect on the legal industry beyond training and what you're doing internally is the effect that it's going to have on your clients and your clients' expectations of how you do the work. So if AI does what it claims to do on the tin and it speeds up efficiencies and productivity and you're able to get through work quicker, naturally, the billable hour, well, you're going to be working for fewer hours, so maybe you're going to bill less, or maybe that's going to be the expectation of the client. They say, we want you to use AI so that we don't have to pay you as much, and that so you can get the work done quicker and we can just get out of here. Because people don't like paying lawyers. Lo and behold, this is actually well, this is sort of an effect that still remains to be seen whether or not that's going to actually happen. In fact, law firm fees have just been rising, but this expectation has led to different sort of alternative models of alternative billing models, alternative
Mm,
pricing models
pricey,
becoming
yeah.
more common, especially fixed fee models. Um, and sort of the creation of the product rather than just the hourly rate as a way of charging for a law firm's work. In particular, I read a story. I was telling Ryan about this, and I couldn't find it for the life of me. It's just disappeared into the ether of the
Ether.
internet. Ah, very good. Um, essentially it was Ashurst was some lawyer at Ashurst was talking about how they were pitching for some work. It was down to the last two law firms, and the final thing that the potential client asked them to do was tell them how they would implement AI and legal tech in order to, as efficiently as possible, do the work. And they had a few weeks and then they had to come back with a strategy. And they made it very clear that they would only really want a law firm to work on this deal if they had an extremely efficient and well thought out AI-based strategy. So what this really drives home to me is that it's no longer an option to just sort of have a vague idea of how you're going to use AI, perhaps use a contract reviewing AI system, or maybe you implement Harvey. You need to have a strategy. And that's where you've had lots of different law firms, creating these new roles like innovation lead or head of AI. I interviewed someone who was the head of AI at Mills and Reeve, for example. So clients expect a strategy and they expect it to have a material effect on their fees. Whether or not this is actually happening is another question. I don't think this means that the billable hour is going away. I think it's still a very useful tool. for pricing, the unpredictable parts of legal work. But if, for instance, lots of these grunt tasks can become sort of more bundled together and more predictable in how long they're going to take, perhaps that's where we'll see the fixed fee models entering in. But I disagree with this notion that we're going to do away with the billable hour forever. I mean, even the CEO of Harvey is saying that. So I think there's a balance to be had here. But yeah, what else were we going to talk about? Training? Are we going to talk about that?
Well, there is the issue that trainees will, not just trainees, probably more so the people higher up in the organization who are probably going to be a lot older and less familiar with the technology. People, I'd say, our age and a little bit younger are kind of blessed to have been born in a time where this is kind of what we're surrounded by.
Yeah.
It's kind of part of the zeitgeist of just being alive right now. We know how to use ChatGPT because everyone around us is using it. I can use it quite well for its like maximum purposes, I guess I would say. Um, Whereas if you ask my parents or my grandparents, I don't think they've ever touched an AI tool before. They probably don't know what AI is. I could show them a TikTok video that's fully AI and they probably believe that a dancing dog was real. I'm not saying law firm partners or senior associates are anywhere near that easily kind of fooled, but I don't think that they will necessarily have been around in the time where AI is so popular and they might not have been exposed to it or have people around them that showing them how to use it. So I think quite a lot of money will actually have to be invested into organizing training sessions on how to maximize and how to actually just get used to using AI, especially if you're doing a full overhaul of when I was paralegal, we merged firms and we merged with another firm and the other firm basically had a different case management system to us, which is just basically a system you use to manage your cases. Um, it was a big hassle for them to kind of move over to our case management system because they had to forget everything they knew and relearn this completely new system that they're using day in, day out, all day, every day. Um, it's very similar with AI. If they're used to like their normal processes of just drafting and I don't know, some platform they're already using, but then they're told, okay, we're getting rid of this in lieu of Harvey. They'll completely have to learn like, from scratch how to use it and how to make the most of it. So it's a very costly process and also a very time consuming process. And there might also be some cultural resistance, I imagine, in that people might just be like, oh well, I don't want to use it. Well,
Yeah.
maybe you don't have a choice. So reskilling and upskilling is very time consuming and expensive. But I think lastly, environmental impact is not necessarily law related, but I mean, there's a lot of discussion about the use of ChatGPT and how energy intensive it is. I'm not sure about specific statistics. I remember I read before it's something like whatever unit you measure energy in, I think it was kilowatt per hour, something like that. It was like zero point 0.6 kilowatts per hour per Google search, but 3.6 per ChatGPT search. So it's like 6 times more energy demanding, I guess. And then you look at data centers too, which I know we've spoken about before, takes up so much land. I remember I've seen in America where people are having data centers built right outside the backyard in these big ugly eyesores, and that's met by a lot of resistance. They're very water intensive to cool them down. And you mentioned about copper too, before. I don't know if you want to touch on that or speak about that.
Yeah, I think actually before I get to that, I
Mm.
wanted to jump onto that point about investment as well before we get into the environment. I think one thing that people forget is that yeah, getting all of this AI infrastructure put in place in a law
Ah,
firm
yeah.
is really, really expensive,
Mm.
and and I think that has something to do with why economies of scale have become so important within the legal sector, why you're seeing law firms become so big. I mean, you look at a firm
Yeah.
like Kirkland and Ellis, and it's because if you have all of that capital and if you have that sort of scale, you're able to invest in these technologies really fulsomely. And so, it's almost incentivizing law firms to get as big as possible. But rounding back, yeah, so this is actually because I was looking, I just came across a case, a sort of deal done with that Weil advised on. I think it was something to do with Rio Tinto. And yeah, the sort of raw materials that are needed to build these data centers, they're immense. I mean, copper is extremely important for sort of the like the actual motherboard types. If you look at one. There's loads of copper. I think
I'll
that's it.
just believe you. I have no idea what they look like. I'll
Fact
just
check
nod.
me in the comments if I may be completely wrong, but it is very important as a raw material for the building
Mm.
of data centers. Same with obviously silicon and semiconductors,
Semiconductors. Yeah.
semiconductors, which are, as we know, made almost exclusively in Taiwan, I
Mm.
think. So, on top of all of these raw materials and the raw energy needed to power all these data centers, because it's so, yeah, resource intensive, it's naturally going to have geopolitical tensions impacting,
Ramifications.
yeah, ramifications impacting on it. Um, yeah, but I think that sort of brings us nicely. You could talk for days about the environmental impact of
Yeah.
AI and data centers. I think it's beyond our remit. But that brings us nicely into the kinds of work that this is actually bringing about for law firms themselves. Because with this immense uptick in, yeah, let's take data centers, building of data centers, acquisition of different companies and whatnot, law firms are going to have work to do.
Lots of it. I mean, in a if we're talking about data centers, if we keep the theme going, just talking about actually constructing a data center, I think I might have also spoken about this at interview or in my application at some point. I knew I was just quite interested in kind of AI tech and then also renewable energy. So those things were interesting to me at the time. Um, just thinking about constructing a data center. Well, first of all, you need the permission to build on the land. You need to go find the land and then you need permission to go build on it. So you need to instruct some real estate lawyers. Um, and then you'll need some projects and infrastructure lawyers to actually help you and construction lawyers to help you construct the data center. Uh, you'll need people to draft the contracts for the supply of resources for, as you say, we need copper, we need silicon, we need other bits and bobs that are too technical for me to know. You need to draft the contracts there and make sure that they are very well drafted so that in case any parts are delivered late or not to the right specifications, that there is some action you can take against them. Um, You'll need the projects and infrastructure lawyers as well to be able to get the data center rigged up to the electric grid. That's something that needs to be thought about. You can't just place a data center anywhere. It needs to have lots of power supplied to it. Also needs a water source nearby, so that's also got to be considered and kind of whoever in a law firm you instruct to be able to get access to that water source so it can cool down the data centers. Probably regulatory lawyers as well to make sure that everything is compliant. I'm not sure of the regulation around data centers. There's probably a lot. Um, but yeah, I think that's all I can think of. And obviously the funding as well. Project finance is a big thing. It's going to be extremely expensive to build data centers. I mean, if you see the absolute size of some of them, they are colossal. I think it was uh, Tesla or Meta, I cannot remember what it was. One of those companies had built like a mile long warehouse data center somewhere in the US, probably I think it was
Yeah.
Texas or something like that. And just think about the sheer cost of that. Like you've got to raise that from somewhere. Project finance lawyers will help draft those documents. And because there's so much money involved in it too, obviously their fees are going to be a lot higher. They're going to take a bigger, I guess, cut of the
Yeah.
fees, or it's just going to require more work, which it gets them to pay more. Um, but you mentioned earlier as well about kind of like the introduction of new innovation roles in law firms and AI offices and things like that. And I think it does kind of give way to law firms to become a bit more of a business advisor, as you also mentioned. There might be more of an expectation that they go beyond strictly legal work because there's so many law firms in the market now, and there's also alternative legal service providers like the Big Four have legal arms. They can provide legal advice as well, perhaps for cheaper. So to be able to compete, you've got to do it on just more than price, I think, and have a different offering. I
Yeah.
don't know. Do you have any more thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's really true, and I think that's why lots of the work that's coming from all of this AI excitement is related to AI companies, investment in AI companies themselves.
Mm.
I think there's so much fear around the sort of let me rephrase. There were like five merger control investigations into AI related companies and sort of other big tech companies, and there are so many sort of mergers going on between AI companies, different acquisitions. Sort of Microsoft was invested into OpenAI. There was
Mm.
Anthropic and Amazon might be wrong.
Yes.
And Mistral, and there are the ecosystem is so intertwined, and that's throwing up lots of competition, regulatory concerns, but then also just the the sort of huge volume of deal making that's coming across lawyers' desks. I spoke to a lawyer at Morrison Forster. They have a big tech focus, and he said, "Yeah, like 95% of the work I do right now is AI related. I need to be so steeped in that world as a business advisor because I need to be able to, you know, give advice that goes beyond just, oh yeah, this works on paper and you'll have this increase in whatever value afterwards, blah blah blah, off you go." Um, and so he's almost like an AI lawyer, not necessarily because he's
Mm.
well versed in like regulations surrounding AI, like the EU AI Act or something, but because he understands the business of it. Yeah, and it's just it's yeah, it's a really strange time to be living in, I suppose.
It is indeed. I think we've about covered everything unless you have anything else to add on AI. But I think we discovered that there's a lot more nuance than I'm going to lose my job because AI is replacing all entry level roles. I think there's still definitely a place for trainees and obviously human lawyers in their profession. There's more than a place. It's necessary. We need someone to review the work. That human element is still so integral to
Yeah,
what you do as a lawyer, connecting with clients, being able to understand their business intentions. And as we discussed, there's lots of things. Not only is it bringing actual legal work, there's kind of offshoots that these law firms are doing, which can bring in extra revenue, like developing their own kind of legal tech tools or business advisory practices slash consultancy practices, things like that. So I think it's just important for law firms to be able to demonstrate that yes, they are making the best use of it because obviously clients are now starting to get more and more interested in it. They want to see that, as you say, with a billable hour, that they're kind of taking as little time as they're not wasting time. They don't want to be incentivized to spend more time on a task. The quicker they do, obviously, the better for them.
yeah,
And there's a lot more competition in the market, so they've got to stand out ultimately.
yeah. It's a strange.
But yeah, it is a weird time to be living in. It's all just growing so exponentially. But if you want to learn more, we had a look at the Financial Times before this, and it's pretty much always in there. And if you go to the tech column, I think that's where we found some articles today about kind of entry level roles was in
Yeah,
there. Look at BBC News's tech column, City AM, and there's also so many newsletters you can subscribe to. That just talk about AI specifically, if that's something you're really interested in. And it's also something that I think to wrap up, we could maybe just talk about how it's could be relevant at interview because
yeah,
I have had a question about legal tech and AI before. Um, it wasn't distinctly like how is AI going to impact our practice. I did get asked that in one of my interviews actually, but another one asked, what's a big opportunity for us in the next couple of years, or what's the big challenge for us in the next couple of years? That's sometimes the question you can get on the application form too. When thinking about that, I think my mind tended to go straight towards, okay, what practice area is booming? Is there going to be a lot more work in equity capital markets, debt capital markets, finance, blah, blah, blah. But I think what they wanted to hear and was kind of steered towards was actually like legal tech and AI, like more so than just thinking about what are the biggest opportunities in terms of practices, what are the biggest opportunities in terms of disruption to the legal profession.
mm, yeah,
And I think you can phrase that as an opportunity or a challenge. As we covered here, there's lots of it's going to be expensive to implement it and expensive and time consuming to retrain people to be able to use it and actually get that cultural change so everyone's on board with it. But then there's also the flip side of the coin, which is that there's so many opportunities by making the work so much more efficient, getting rid of the drudge work, starting to letting trainees do more client interaction and more value adding and critical thinking type of work. I don't know. Do you have anything to add on that point?
yeah. No, I think it's super important to not be freaked out if you do get asked that sort of a question and at interview, and to realize that there's no one correct answer to it. We've illustrated quite strongly that there are so many different facets to this that you could talk about. You could conceivably talk about the kind of work that legal tech and AI is creating on a sort of legal works level. You could talk about how it provides an alternative avenue for, developing your own tools and having that as an additional stream of revenue. You could talk about, obviously, the most obvious, streamlining. You could talk about regulatory risk for your clients themselves. So you need to look at it from both. I think this is the key point. Look at it from both the law firm's perspective as a business in its own right, and look at it from the perspective of the clients that the law firms are working for. Um, and then you have that additional perspective of the people who work within the law firm, the trainees, the people who aren't used to working with AI. It's such a nuanced conversation that I think, yeah, you are more than likely going to be asked about at an interview, and you need to provide somewhat of a coherent answer. But I think hopefully this should calm your nerves if you have one coming up. That there's so much to talk about. It should be quite exciting, if anything.
Hopefully, or one can hope. I mean, all industries, I don't think there's any industry that's insulated from the impacts of AI. Maybe apart from, I'd say, the arts, but then again, like you see the rise of people using AI art now and other things like that, which I was going to say people aren't very happy with as you look away in disdain.
Ugh,
Um,
anyway.
but but yeah, I think it's important to kind of realize that it's not just uh, it's not just having an impact on law. The clients of your law firm will be from all sorts of different industries. And
Mm,
AI will also have use cases there to think about and how they're going to implement that. So, I mean, it's just something to be aware of. It's one of those commercial awareness topics that is just a buzzword. It gets thrown around relentlessly and for good reason. It's important to know about. It's probably relevant to your interview or like your application because it does demonstrate an understanding of the industry you're going into. I don't think there's ever been a bigger kind of disruption or change to the legal industry
mm.
until now, at least in my lifetime that I can think of. This seems like humongous to me, the way that the way work will probably continue to change over the next couple of years. But it's exciting as well.
And you need to
It's
have an
fun
opinion.
to I think you should don't take a neutral stance. Like just try. I mean, be nuanced, but like have an opinion on it. I think it's an exciting time to be a trainee as well. I think quite a lot of people. I think there's a risk that some people can feel daunted, like, oh, I'm not going to have a job because of AI. But as I say, you can probably make that case for many an industry, and I just don't think it's strictly true. I think humans will always be needing lots of very human. It's a very human industry. But yeah, exciting times ahead. I feel lots of change coming up.
Indeed.
Indeed, indubitably. And with that, I think that's all we got time for on our fourth episode of the Legal Cheat podcast. We have
Cool.
made lots of progress in these 4 weeks. Wow, what a pleasure it has been.
Yeah, thank you everyone for listening. It's been lovely, and we'll see you next week. Bye from me.
I'd say leave a comment about what you want us to talk about, but there's no comments on Spotify. But also, bye from me. Oh, there are comments. Oh well, comments on Spotify. Tell us what you want us to talk about. We might speak about it sometime. But a bye from me as well. Thanks for listening, guys.